RotoGrinders Today. I'm Jordan Cooper, a.k.a. BlenderHD. BlenderHD. You're going to follow me on Twitter. And it's Tuesday, June 4th. We got a big baseball slate today. I mean, we got a 10-game slate that starts at 7:05 p.m. Eastern on DraftKings, but there's also a couple of those 6:35 and 6:40 games Eastern that obviously you can bet on, right? We'll be talking a little bit about that. Props, pick 'em, daily fantasy. Hit that thumbs up button on your way in the door. You know how much I like the thumbs. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell to know when we go live. Later today at 5 o'clock, Grinders Live will be coming on to give you a little bit more detailed look at the slate. Then crunch time, Roth will be on with the weather report. And I'm here in the morning, early in the morning, with Taylor Smith. And talking about the weather, Taylor, I think that's going to be an important factor. There's one game, the Cubs and the White Sox, that Roth has at yellow-orange, and can the game get in between? Who knows the timing? It's 8 hours from now. I'm assuming that that's going to be quite important on two sides, on both pitching and hitting.
Yeah, because it looks like there's also 10-mile-an-hour wind blowing out to the left, so pretty good hitting conditions. But even so, Imanaga projects as the top overall pitcher on the slate. Presumably, the White Sox matchup kind of outweighs the hitting weather. So, yeah, it's pretty important. He's 10-6 on DK, so it's not like he's coming at a discount. Obviously, quite a bit of risk if the weather is not going to be cleared by then, but the weather report's optimistic. Roth says he thinks there's a window for it as of now, but it's early. Things can change. Should be interesting to see if the weather winds up affecting his ownership, because right now it looks like he's not the chalkiest pitcher on the board, but he's going to be owned today.
Well, you could say the same thing about a bunch of pitchers. So even if you have a little bit of fear of playing Shota Imanaga. Now, obviously on DraftKings, obviously on both sites, there are going to be other pitchers. If the game gets, by 7 o'clock lock, they don't know. And then, before 8:05 p.m. Eastern, you'll be able to switch. You could switch over to, there's all these games afterwards. So it's not like the end of the world. If, you obviously may leave some money on the table, but you're not stuck with like a zero or anything like that. I think more the risk is that if they start the game and then it kind of gets rained out in the fourth inning or something like that, then that's not a big deal. But there's other pitchers on. If I don't view this slate as a Shota Imanaga is clearly the top pitcher on the entire slate, and then there's a humongous gap to the rest of the pitchers on the slate. I'd make a case that I can make a case for playing probably 10 pitchers on the slate, depending on the price point. But even at the high level, like 10-6 or even like 8K and above, you got George Kirby, Max Fried, Luis Gil, Corbin Burns, Jack Flaherty. I don't know about Vlad. I know he's looked good recently. He's not a guy that I could trust. So you're not stuck. I don't think. Do you think this is a slate? If you knew this Cubs game was playing, would you consider Shota Imanaga to be like one? Like if you were playing one lineup, would you just lock him in, or do you see more cases where if I told you he was going to be 30% owned, like, is it something that you like? Do you have to play him?
No, I don't think so at all. It's kind of like last night where Wheeler and Skubal are the best pitchers overall, but they're also priced accordingly. And the ownership was decent on them. I think they were up in the 30% range, but there was enough else to where you could spread things out pretty easily and kind of allocate salary elsewhere. I think this is a similar situation with him and Heel at the top. And I guess you could say Burns is kind of the third one in that group. But Kirby and Fried are the ones that stand out to be the most in the 9K range. Kirby at 8.8 against Oakland on the road just seems like a very obvious top option to me at that salary. Great matchup, great park. he's good to begin with. He and Fried aren't the highest strikeout pitchers, but Fried at Boston is a little less comfortable park downgrade, but Red Sox aren't that imposing this year, especially against lefties. Fried just gets through easy innings, it seems. Even if he's not racking up a ton of strikeouts, the ground balls are there. So I think the prices make Fried and Kirby the most intriguing options. I can see that being the chalk combo. But there is enough else to where it's not going to be overwhelming chalk, even if it is the popular build.
I mean, to put things in perspective, Max Fried has a higher strikeout prop today than Shota Imanaga.
Yeah, it's not like Imanaga is this guy that has this long track record of being, he's not, Garrett Cole or something. He's a guy that's been pretty lucky through his first however many 10 MLB starts. He saw a little bit of regression the last time out finally. The matchup is good. I think he's, like, in terms of raw projection, I can see why he's the top overall guy. But for 10-6, it's not like we're getting a discount. And it's not like the strikeout stuff is can't miss with him.
I mean, obviously, when we talk about expensive pitchers, you have to fit bats around them, right? So if you're going to play expensive pitchers, I mean, there's value on this slate, but like if you want to stack the Reds today in Coors, I mean, it's going to be pretty tough, with playing a 10-6 pitcher as well as like 8-8 Kirby. Like that type of combination, you'd be going to lesser stacks. So either if you're going to prioritize pitcher, you're going to be trying to, you're going to be looking at these kind of cheaper stacks that, I mean, we have some that aren't bad today. I think hitting is much more wide open than people may think. I mean, Coors is clearly above everything else, but I also think all the ownership is going there as well. But if you're going to pair an expensive pitcher with maybe a cheaper pitcher, which guys are you looking at? I mean, you're not going to like them. You're not going to feel comfortable. But I think you could. I think there may be two you can get away with that are kind of like under $7K, I guess.
Montas being one of them.
I know that Montas is up there only because the Rockies are not good, and Montas could pitch 100 pitches. I mean, like, to me, that's the reason why Montas' median projection looks good in the bat. I think I'd much more rather play Arrighetti at 6,700 against the Cardinals, or Spence against in Oakland against Seattle because of the high strikeouts. Even Sandoval against the Padres. I know Montas. The bat may not know that Montas sucks now.
Yeah,
right. Because the bat takes a much longer term approach than a shorter term approach. So I get the sense that there's a lot of still data in there that Montas is actually halfway decent, and that could be true. But I don't think I'll be going on the journey of playing Frankie Montas on this slate, unless you tell me for whatever reason that the Rockies are going to be like ridiculously owned, which I don't think they'll be owned, but they won't be like the chalkiest team on the slate. And I even thinking like 3 to 5% ownership. I don't know. It's one of these like waves. Like you look at the projection, you go, yeah, I'm going to find the 700 to play Arrighetti. And it's not like I trust Arrighetti. It's just that I don't trust Montas. I mean, I said that yesterday with Gausman. It's like, I know Gausman projects well, but I don't know. You can't. He's not a very trustworthy pitcher. He could have really good games and really bad ones. And Frankie Montas, for the most part, has really bad ones.
It's like the Lance Lynn thing. Like, it's good that the bat takes the long-term numbers into account generally. That can give you an edge, but it can also make potentially washed pitchers look a little less washed. Lance Lynn is a guy that tends to pop in the bat. He'll have a decent start every now and then, but he's not the same guy he was 2 years ago even. Montas is probably kind of falling victim to the same thing. Like you said, Arrighetti at least is kind of on the upward trajectory of his career as a rookie. So I think there is some strikeout upside there, even against St. Louis. Obviously, anyone facing Seattle has strikeout upside just because the Mariners do not make contact ever. So I don't love that either, but he's only 6'5", so Spence is perfectly viable. I guess you can make a case for Dane Dunning even against the Tigers at a sub 8K salary on DK. I think he looks okay. Not a very comfortable play either, but he can get through some innings, and it's the Tigers, so it's not a particularly imposing lineup. Not really sure what to make of this.
About the Padres pitcher.
Yeah, I was just about to bring him up.
What the hell is an Adam Mazer?
I saw I think this is his debut. I know nothing of him. I think he's one of their better prospects, but I don't know what that means relative to league average. Like, do they have a good system? I'm not familiar with that kind of thing. He projects okay. It is the Angels. Is he right-handed? Yeah, I think. Let's see. Don't know.
Yeah, right-handed against the Angels. Bat has him at a median of an 81 pitch count, which for me on a larger slate like this, I don't know. I mean, unless 7,700 isn't like cheap. So,
right.
I mean, so you for another like 1,100, you get up to Kirby, right? For another, I mean, for 1,000 less, you get Arrighetti. It's I tend to lean, me personally, on volume over efficiency. That if I know a pitcher could go 6+ innings, like that there's a way for someone to get 20+ points. Even if they give up 3 runs, they get 7 strikeouts, I'm fine, right? But when you got guys with pitch counts where they may only pitch 5 innings at best, like that margin for error is like if you give up 2 or 3 runs, unless you're someone that could strike out every other batter, you're not going to give me enough raw points that in GPPs that it's worth me playing. Like if it's like cash games, it's a different story. But I'm looking to beat out 10,000 people or even 500 people in a small field contest. That's why, I'm the type of person that I play Max Fried more than most people, no matter what the matchup is, because dude could throw a complete game the way that he pitches.
He and Kirby,
right?
kind of the same guy. Yeah.
Right. So I prefer those types of pitchers than the guys that are like, well, first start against the Angels, you never know. And do you really think that unless he's pitching completely lights out, I don't see him. I mean, do they typically give debut pitchers like, oh yeah, we're going to give you the third time through the order after you've struggled the second time through the order enough that like they're going to take him out? I mean, like that's why.
Yeah. I think 5 innings might be a cap unless he's like throwing a no-hitter or something.
Right.
So 7, that's really not a high enough ceiling. And the floor is low enough to where, like you said, you might as well just pay less for Arrighetti, who median projection-wise looks better straight up for 1K less. Ditto for Spence. Cutter Crawford is 500 more. He looks fine, I guess, for 8-2. It is the Braves. Like, don't want to pick on the Braves, so I don't have to on a 10-game slate. But if you're throwing darts in a large field tournament, I could see Crawford being on the list. I guess Ober is the same thing. Don't want to play him against the Yankees, but he is AK. He is okay overall. But yeah, there's a lot of pretty serious downside with a lot of these guys. So maybe that's why we could see ownership on someone like Heel or Imanaga get steamed up a bit for the perceived safety of it. But I do think Kirby, I'm not sure how he projects ownership-wise as of now, but I don't see why he wouldn't be the obvious chalk at 8-8 against the A's.
Yeah, because attacking the A's is always, you attack the A's, you attack the White Sox, and then you got Imanaga and Kirby, and then there you go. I think that's going to be the chalk combination, and we'll have some value bats in those types of lineups. But as far as buckets are concerned, do you consider, would you say that the top bucket of pitchers, like I would put in the top bucket Imanaga, Kirby, and Fried. Like that would be like if I would be happy in my single entry lineup with 2 of those pitchers. If I can make the rest of my lineup work, I'd rather have 2 of those pitchers.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear cut. That's the top bucket. Heel, like on the outside looking in, he's probably leading the second bucket.
So who would be in the second? Who would be in the second bucket then?
Heel would be there. I would put Dave Dunning in there just for the price, and then Arrighetti and Spence just for the price as well.
Okay, so someone like Flaherty doesn't make the second bucket.
Flaherty and Burns are not really on my radar right now. Matchups aren't very good. They're not cheap. I guess Flaherty's not, like, he's the same price essentially as Fried and Kirby, but I don't know. Fried and Kirby just project better. They have easier spots. I would hear a case, obviously, for Burns or Flaherty in the second tier, but for me, they would come in the third bucket.
And by the way, we just got word that Royce Lewis has been activated off the IL for the Twins. And to make it clear, all of our projections have already accounted for that. So that's why I wanted to check to see our starting lineup page does have Royce Lewis in. So Gil's projection accounts for Royce Lewis being back. I mean, the Twins have a 3.43 flight team total. So it's not like I don't think it's going to matter all that much. So in the case of Flaherty and Burns, you would at least put them in the third bucket. They're not pitchers that you would just completely X out.
No, I don't like they're too good to X out. Both have ceilings, and in tournaments, that's what you're hunting for. The Blue Jays are not a high strikeout lineup. Burns hasn't really been a great strikeout guy in a couple of years, so he's 10K. I would just rather chase Imanaga and Heel up there. Flaherty, kind of the same thing. He's been phenomenal, and he might be owned, but if he's going to be popular, I'm going to come in pretty under the field on him, I think.
How about guys like Sandoval, Ober? I mean, guys in bad matchups. Like Sandoval, Ober, Mazer. I mean,
Crawford.
Crawford. Are those X outs, or are those like they're the bottom of the third? They're like take a shot in large field tournament type of third bucket.
I think I would try Montas ahead of them just because he's 6K and the others are a bit pricier, but they're probably all in the same group. Like they're good-ish. Sandoval, Ober, Crawford are fine. Just on this slate, I'm not sure you need to dive that deep. And Sandoval is cheap, but Padres not a very high strikeout lineup, decent power from the right side, all that. So I'm not looking his way too much as of now, but they're viable just because they're not gas cans or anything. So if you are dart throwing in a large field contest, I think they're in play.
Okay, let's go to stacks. And you know what we do with the stacks? We have our tiers A, B, C, D, and F. We got 20 teams on the slate. This is all adjusted for ownership. So if you're watching now, if you're watching later, this is based on what we think ownership will be projected right now, the starting lineups right now, everything like that. So just, obviously Coors is going to be towards the top, but maybe it gets dinged and goes down a tier because we may think that they're over-owned. But let's start. I'm going to use the BAT stacks point per dollar projections. Obviously, with the if you tell the BAT that the wind is blowing out at Wrigley Field, the BAT's going to like stacks of that game. Number one right now in the BAT for point per dollar value is the Cubs, not highest raw team, against Chris Flexen in Wrigley. We're going to go with the assumption, Taylor, that the game is playing and it's uninterrupted, right? So we're going to just, there's no risk there. Where would you put the Cubs on the tier list?
So based on total and projection, they would be A, but I think they're going to be somewhat popular even on a Coors slate. So I think B is probably where I'd put them. It is a good spot against Flexen, not a good pitcher, fly balls, reverse split, and all that. Cubs are also pretty cheap. on DK. Bellinger's the only one over 5K. A bunch of other guys mid to low fours. So good value stack. I get it. Ownership knocks it down to B probably.
Another cheap team on this slate. And people don't tend to play them much at all. They're in Arizona, so that's a ballpark upgrade for them. It's the San Francisco Giants. Good point per dollar value. They actually have a pretty decent raw projection in the bat. I would think Giants would be more likely to appear in lineups where people are playing like Imanaga Kirby, Imanaga Freed type lineups. So I'm not sure how low owned they're going to be, but I don't think the Giants are the type of team that people like to click on. So would you? I mean, I have to put them towards the top. I mean, would you put the Giants on the B tier?
I was debating A or B, which isn't, the Giants are not good. I played a little bit of Ryan Nelson against them, but they are projecting quite well. Is this like a bullpen game for Arizona with this Walston guy? I'm not sure who that even is pitching for them.
I think so.
Yeah, I think value-wise they belong in B, just because it's not a very good offense. Like if Estrada's in, they look a little bit better. Good park though, relative to their home park. So I would consider putting them in A, just because of the way they look. But if they're going to be somewhat popular and they're still the Giants, then B is probably right.
I think they're going to be a little over-owned for their prices, only because people are going to double barrel pitcher, and then San Francisco makes the most sense as a stack, because I don't think people are going to play the White Sox. We'll get to some of these other stacks where the pitchers are going to be more owned, because a similar team to the Giants with price and projection is the Cardinals against Spencer Arrighetti. And I think Arrighetti is good, maybe not chalk, but he's going to be owned. So, like, picture the Giants if the opposing team's pitcher is going to be owned. So, like, I know it's maybe weird to say, are the Cardinals on the A tier because of that?
Yeah. I think they are. Kind of like what we said, they're really cheap. Like Goldschmidt's 4K, everyone else is under. So you can easily get them with expensive pitching or with Cincinnati Yankee kind of thing if you want to do that. Ownership's not really there. Like you said, Arrighetti might be chalky. It is a park upgrade for the Cardinals. I think they're A, and all things considered, maybe my top stack on the slate, which feels extremely awful, but sometimes awful wins in MLB.
Another team that's awful that may be up there. I have 2 home run props for this team. That's Garver and Dylan Moore at plus 750. That's the Mariners against Mitch Spence. Their raw projection is not great. But they're cheap. I'm not sure about full stacking the Mariners, but I wouldn't mind the one-offs. I don't think they're going to be. They'll be lower owned than the Giants and the Cardinals, I think. And it's not like Spence is not going to be like that owned. Like maybe it'll end up being 8% owned or something like that. So, would you agree with me? Maybe the Mariners go in C, like because they're not that good of a team.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't put them on D tier because they're too cheap. So like C, because remember this is a stack list, so it's not like the Mariners. I actually prefer as like one-offs. So that's why like a 5-man stack, like I could even consider them a D team. But I'm fine with C. I don't know what you think about the Mariners.
Yeah, I would have them higher if Spence were like the popular SP2, but I don't really think that'll be the case. So the ballpark's not good for offense, of course. They're not particularly good anyway. Like they have obviously some power in there, but the park kind of mutes power in general. So I could see one-offs or a 3-man type thing, but full stack wise, C or D sounds about right.
Okay, let's get out of the way the popular game, the highest total game, the Coors game. The Reds against Block and the Rockies against Montas. From a point per dollars perspective, they're about, in the bat at least, they're about equal. The Reds have a higher raw point projection. Obviously, they have a higher team total. I'm expecting the Reds to be the highest owned team on the slate. With so many teams on this slate, here's the question. Remember, just because the team is chalk, the highest owned, doesn't mean that that makes them like a bad play. A team could be owned, the most owned, and still be under-owned. So do you think on a large slate like this, where we have you got the Astros and the Yankees and the Braves, and there's other teams on this slate, people going cheap, right, with double barreling pitchers, so you're not going to be able to get really the Reds. The Reds will be the highest owned team, but do you think they're going to be high owned enough?
I don't think they will be. They were the highest owned team last night, but it wasn't overwhelmingly so on a similarly sized slate. I'm getting to them more than anyone else, which is not a surprise. And I'm looking through the lineups that I have them in. Some Padres stacks alongside them, some White Sox stacks with them, Cardinals, a little bit of Colorado mixed in too. Colorado not projecting for a ton of ownership. It's a great spot. Obviously, them putting up 13 runs might inflate things a little. Like, people will just see that happened and like, oh, it'll happen again for sure. Obviously, it's Coors Field. But I'm just going to put them on A regardless of the ownership. I think it's not going to be too much, and great spot. So I'm fine with that.
How about the other side? How about the Rockies?
Rockies, I'll say B, just because it's the Rockies and they're not very good. But Montas isn't either at this point, as we've talked about. I don't think they'll be very popular. They never really are when they're at home, even in Coors. So I'm okay with them overall. I think B is about right for them, though.
Then here's a cheap team, probably one of the highest leverage spots on the slate. The White Sox against Shota Imanaga. With the wind blowing out at Wrigley Field, my take is that I always, in these tier lists, if you don't know me, anytime that you could take a stack against like one of the chalkiest pitchers on the slate, they can't possibly be an F tier team because you're going to knock out so many lineups by doing so. So they're automatically D in there. But I don't care how cheap they are. I'd much rather, if you're not gonna play Imanaga and you're gonna play the Wrigley Wind, I think it's much better to just like play the White Sox as one-offs, two mans. Because I doubt that the White Sox, out of 20 teams on the slate, will be the highest scoring team. But Shota Imanaga could fail and only get like 12 points, and the White Sox put up, 2 home runs, and they could be useful. But I don't know about a 5-man stack being useful.
Yeah, I don't think you need to go that far. Like I said, I was getting to some of them with Cincinnati, and Cincinnati was the 5-man. Chicago was the 2 or 3-man to go along with it. The lineup is just really watered down now. Like, there's no Jimenez, there's no Luis Robert, of course, no Yohan Moncada. So it's just a rough group. I think Pham, DeYoung, and Jolks would be the quote-unquote headliners. Maybe Corey Lee as a catcher.
That's not saying
brutal.
Much.
It is not.
Your best hitters.
Yeah, it's a dark time over there. But they're cheap, and the wind's blowing out, and Imanaga is a fly ball guy, so it's not out of the realm of possibility for a couple of them to hit some dongs and make your mini stack look a little more impressive. So I could see borderline C, but D is probably more appropriate.
Okay. Another team that kind of sucks, but at least is a little bit better than the White Sox. They're facing Dane Dunning, so I don't know how much leverage you're going to get. I don't think Dunning is going to be very owned. And that's the Tigers. Are the Tigers kind of like in the same place? That, I mean, I feel like I'd much rather play the Giants and the Cardinals, even at their ownership, than play, like, the Tigers are not going to be owned really at all. But maybe they shouldn't be.
Yeah, I would have them D also. They're also more expensive. Like, Riley Green's over 5K, a few other guys in the mid 4s. So they're not like the White Sox or Mariners as far as value, or even the Cardinals. as far as value goes. So they're not cheap. It's not a great spot. It's not a good park. You're not getting leverage. They're definitely toward the bottom. Probably D. That seems fair.
Could you say the same about the Angels against Adam Mazer? I mean, I never mind taking a team against a newcomer because maybe the guy just sucks completely. I'm just not sure if Angels are the team that would do it anyway. They're not. I mean, they're in the similar spot as like the Tigers, where they're not dirt cheap, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I mean, are the Angels any better than the Tigers in this spot, or I mean, or should they go even high? I mean,
Not
I
if
don't think anyone's
Mazur's
playing
going to
Mazer.
be.
I just
Yeah, that's the thing. Like if he was going to be chalk in his debut, then they're probably a B stack. But since he's probably not going to be popular, he's not that cheap himself. There's really nothing you're getting out of it. It's also not a very talented lineup. Like maybe Adele, Renjifo one-offs are fine. Ohapi as a catcher, fine with that. But full stack wise, probably not worth getting to. There's just no need. I don't see what you're getting out of them on a 10-game slate.
Okay, let's get to some at least better talented teams that are kind of like in the mid-range as far as projection and point per dollar value. I think these teams may end up being a little maybe underowned because they're not in great spots, but they could always put up a bunch of runs. One is the Diamondbacks against Kyle Harrison. I typically not the type of person I roster Kyle Harrison more than I take stacks against him. The Diamondbacks are a very stackable team. Like when they put up a lot of runs, I mean, it's typically not one person. Typically, they put it up in bunches, and the stack gets there. I don't think that. I mean, my inclination is C, but if you can make the case for a B stack, because I mean, to me, the two teams they're in this spot are like the Diamondbacks and the Padres. Like the Padres against Sandoval. Like two similar types of teams. Obviously, weird for me to say I trust the Diamondbacks more than the Padres. But the Padres obviously have like raw talent wise, like Machado and Tatis. Like these guys are like top level players. My inclination is to throw them in the C tier, but if you can make the case for them to be B tier, or maybe you think they're worse than D tier because you're not getting much leverage off of these guys. I mean, they're facing pitchers that probably won't be very owned, but also pitchers that you don't look at and go, yeah, this guy's going to give up 10 runs either. So where would you put the Diamondbacks and the Padres?
I think both C. I think Arizona might be borderline D, but Sandoval doesn't really allow a lot of home runs, but it is a good park. It is going to be warm there, I think, so it's not bad hitting weather for the Padres. I'm tired of chasing them like I did last night once again, but Sandoval can get in trouble with walks. It is a pretty patient lineup overall. Not that walks are thrilling, but if he's putting guys on the bases, then there's potential for big innings and all that. So I see the merits to both of them. I don't think Harrison's bad either, though. Arizona's offense is fine. Like you like Walker and Grichuk maybe and Gurriel against the lefty. Moreno, if he's hitting second, is going to be probably a pretty popular value play at catcher. And then Marte at the top is fine. But Arizona's just not cheap in general. So you're paying a premium for a stack that's not really getting you leverage. They don't have the highest total. I guess it's not a bad total, though. 4.75, I see. Yeah, I think C is fine. I'm not really geeked about either of them on this slate.
Well, let's talk about teams that have high raw projections, but these are the expensive stacks. These are the stacks where you're playing a Montas or an Arrighetti or a Spence in the SB2 spot. But these stacks definitely have ceiling. The Braves against Cutter Crawford in Boston. I mean, they project in the bat higher than the Rockies. Not higher than the Cubs and not higher than the Reds. I don't think people are going to play the the Braves today. I mean, the Braves, since Acuna has been gone, I always find in a lot of contests they end up going under-owned, and
Yeah.
maybe they've been disappointing, but you look at their lineup. I mean, they're playing in I mean, they're getting a ballpark upgrade technically, right?
Hmm.
As far as expensive stacks, if I'm not going to play Coors and I'm not going to play the Cubs, am I doing it? Is this a Ponzi scheme that I just keep on putting the Braves in the A tier and just lose my money every day? I mean,
I'm doing the same thing, and I'll probably do it again today. So, yeah, I think ownership puts them up there. Just like they project well, decent total. Crawford, not a gas can, of course, but you know,
they've been
it's a good
gutless,
offense.
Taylor.
They have
They're a
been
gutless
gutless.
team. Like the Padres, they're gutless.
They are just as gutless as the Padres. I don't know what happened to their guts. They lost all their guts over one winter, but I guess that'll happen. It's expensive, but if the ownership's not there, then I get it. Good
Would
park
you
and all
rather
that.
play? So Taylor, would you rather play? Here's the two teams. Would you rather play the Braves or the Astros against Palante? They're in a similar like point per dollar value. I mean, the Braves project a little bit better than the Astros, but it's a similar type of team. And I'm not sure what's going on with Kyle Tucker, but we have Kyle Tucker projected in right now. So let's just talk, assuming that Kyle Tucker is in.
Even if he's in, I have them below the Braves. Payante's not imposing either, but this lineup, once you get past Tucker and Alvarez, it's not the greatest. Diaz, in theory, is a good hitting catcher, and he's cheap, but I don't know. I think there is value here beyond the top two, but Atlanta top to bottom is a better lineup. I think the park is better for hitting, and I think if they're going to be comparably owned to one another, I would just take Atlanta straight up, which relegates the Astros probably to B
tier.
Yeah, they're B.
They're B tier. Okay.
Yeah.
How about two more teams that high ceiling? They project lower than both the Braves and the Astros today, but obviously they have a ceiling. The Yankees against Ober and the Orioles against what I believe now is going to be Trevor Richards and not Bowden. It may just be a bullpen game for the Blue Jays. They project okay. Like these teams project okay, but I mean, not much. Like they're still middle of the pack, but obviously we've seen their ceilings. It's just that they're these are expensive stacks, really expensive stacks, where you may not even be able to play a 10K pitcher in your lineup to stack these teams. This is a double barreling the 6K pitcher type of stacks, which also will reduce their ownership. I mean, and the Yankees are the Yankees. I mean, imagine getting Soto and Judge at 3% owned. I mean, they could. I mean, the Yankees could break any slate. And you could say that's kind of the same for the Orioles. I have Mountcastle's home run prop today at plus 550 on MGM. Me personally, at their prices, I can't. That their team totals aren't high enough that they go in like the A. If you told me they were 2% owned, I still don't think they make the A tier. But I would. Would they even make the B tier? I mean, would you put? I mean, they make at least the C tier. I mean, these aren't D tier teams because of their.
That's the thing. Like I'm getting to them as if they're D tier, just because they're pricey and they're not winding up in a lot of my lineups, and it's horrifying. But we live in the world of a salary cap, they say. So I think C is fine. I think you can make a case for B just based on talent. I would nudge the Orioles slightly ahead of the Yankees because I'd rather pick on Richards in the bullpen than Ober, but it is the Yankees. They probably have the highest ceiling of any team every night. So won't be sad about getting to either of them. I'm not really looking at that at the moment. But probably about C tier, just based on salary and the nature of the slate makes it hard to get to them.
Right. J3 says that I used to be cool when I gave vomit stacks. I've changed. We don't live in the world of vomit stacks anymore. I mean,
everyone's a vomit stack this season.
Well, it's more the pitching. It's like vomit. People always thought of vomit stacks as, oh, well, get a cheap team that no one owns. It's like, no, it's more about being able to get 2 11K pitchers that get you 35 plus points each. And we just don't have pitchers that do that anymore. Like, just like, but do you feel the need to pay up for Shota Imanaga and Luis Gil today? Like, do you need to? I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, there'll be some days where, sure, that does work out, but nowhere near the way it was, a couple of years ago, where you just go, yeah, I'm going to play Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom, and good luck. Have fun.
Yeah.
The rest of it. And as long as the Tigers at 3K salaries put up like 6-7 runs, like, I don't need the highest stack. It doesn't matter. The Yankees put up 10 runs. Yeah, but they're twice as expensive, and you couldn't get those 2 pitchers. So, like, that's the vomit stack theory. It's a lineup construction thing, not just the stacks. But let's talk about vomit stacks. Here's a team that you can't put in the F tier just simply because who they're up against. The A's against George Kirby. And you could even say the Red Sox against Fried. Do they both? I mean, do you think that Kirby and Fried are going to be owned enough that it warrants that these teams shouldn't be even in the F tier? Because the projection would tell you these 2 teams should be in the F tier.
Right. And the ownership, now I see Kirby is coming in with the highest ownership. So by default, the A's against him are probably going to be D. I guess the Red Sox too. I'm probably not going to do that. I'd rather play the White Sox against Imanaga, as awful as that sounds. But ownership alone and the leverage angle makes Oakland and Boston better than the worst, but they're still probably the worst. So for this practice, it's probably D tier.
So do you think the worst on this, like from a projection standpoint, like Luis Gil isn't going to be nearly as owned as Shota Imanaga? I know Royce Lewis is back, but it's not like he's cheap. Like, the thing about the Twins is that the Twins are one of the lower projected. I mean, they're on the bottom quarter of projected teams, and they're expensive. Like, for their projection, are the Twins the F tier stack?
I think so, because you're not, like you said, he's going to be somewhat owned, I think, but he's not going to be the chalk SB1 because he's the most expensive pitcher and he doesn't project that way necessarily. The Twins also do the pinch hitting thing a lot. They play platoons and matchups and stuff, so you're not guaranteed to get a full game's worth of at-bats out of some of these guys. Kirilloff being one of them, Kepler potentially being another. So pinch hit risk, salary matchup, all things considered, Minnesota's probably F. And they might be alone in the F tier, honestly.
How about because we only have, 2 teams left that we haven't put in, I believe. I think it's
a couple of Ds.
Yeah, we have Texas against Flaherty and Toronto against Burns. And, I mean, I think Burns tends to be overprojected by most of the industry, but it's not a guy that I typically pick on at all. Flaherty could be Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, so I'd be more inclined to play Texas against Flaherty than Toronto against Burns, but I don't put any. I mean, these teams don't get up to the C tier. To me, the question is, do either of these teams deserve the F tier?
I think you could make a case for Toronto in the F tier just because Burns is good and he's not going to be popular. So you're not getting leverage by stacking Toronto. Their lineup has been pretty underwhelming for a long time. And they're not cheap necessarily. They're not as pricey as they used to be, but still not a value stack, I would say. So I'd hear a case for them as an F, borderline D. Texas, I would put straight up D, just because, like you said, Flaherty's not established necessarily as this ace that he's been this season. He's been pretty rocky for years, so the bottom dropping out of that wouldn't be a huge shock. And Texas does have decent talent at the top of the lineup, so... and Flaherty's probably going to be a little more popular than Burns for 800 less. So you are getting a little bit of leverage, I think, with Texas, which nudges them past Toronto for me.
Okay. Well, there's our tiers. Apparently people like the new tiers format. that we do. Good way of talking about the slate without, going position by position or anything. And also, we're not even sure what the lineups are going to be. So, like, this guy batting second is maybe batting seventh, or who knows? The pitchers may change. We don't know anything like that. From a lineup construction perspective, on the way out the door, would you rather, like, we see the tiers here. So you have like cheap Cardinals, expensive Braves, chalky Reds. Would you rather eat the Reds chalk and get different at pitcher? Or would you rather play fade cores, play a Braves plus Cardinals lineup, and then just eat the top bucket at pitcher? If you're playing, let's say, the 121, like a single entry 500 person contest.
I would probably take the pitching. I would take Fried / Kirby probably and stack Atlanta if you can, or Fried and Dane Dunning, something like that. I wouldn't go full on Dunning / Spence stack the Reds in that scenario, I don't think, just because the cheap pitching is viable, but I don't have a ton of confidence in it. I think you can stack Fried and Kirby with some Braves and then like a Cardinals or a Rockies value-ish stack secondary. Because between them, you're only paying like 17, 18,000 a pitcher. So there's still enough salary left over to stack Atlanta with someone like the Cardinals and get away with it.
Right. I think this slate, as of right now, I think there's many more stacks that are viable than what maybe people may think from a price perspective and a ceiling perspective, especially if that Cubs game plays.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because we'll have to, especially Coors grab some ownership, Cubs grab some ownership. Then you look and you're like, why not play the Braves at 2%, or the Yankees at 2%, or the Orioles at 2%? I mean, like all the Astros. If you could, I mean, we see this in basketball, right? I didn't play NBA DFS this past year, but I'm very successful in NBA DFS. The number one thing that I would do is just play good players, and even if it's a bad matchup, rather than it's a good matchup, so play this garbage person that may do well because he's playing against the worst team in the league. It's like, no, I'm just going to play the $8,500 guy that is going to be 2% owned because they're a 12-point underdog or something like that. And it's like, well, what happens if it actually is a close game that goes over? Well, they're a good player. So, like, it's like the opposite. I almost feel like people that watched me years ago, Mr. Vomit Stack, are like, oh, so your whole thing now is to just play the good teams. I go, yeah, because that's kind of, because getting 30 plus to 40 plus points a pitcher is not a given anymore. So yeah, I'll play the good teams that people think are in bad matchups because they look at a pitcher and go, oh, this team can't do well against that pitcher. It's like, dude, teams do well against every pitcher, right? There's like this. Is there any pitcher in the league right now that's healthy that you feel 100% complete confidence in when you roster?
I sort of felt that way about Chris Sale the other day, and then he got nuked by the A's. So, to your point, there's really nothing that inspires a ton of confidence. Glass now even has been kind of hit or miss. Anyone can be got any day. So, no, like Strider being gone kind of means there's no one left at this point that's untouchable. So that's why stacking against Kirby and Fried while gross is still in play, because you never know. It's daily fantasy, so one bad game is all we're betting on here, and that's obviously within everyone's range of outcomes.
Tony's asking about the prop, but the prop package does not. We don't have. I mean, we do have data. We do have projections for that, but I don't believe that's in the prop package. I think if you want the data for all the esports stuff, you would have to get a RotoGrinders premium subscription. But maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I don't bet on esports, but I don't see it in the prop model. But we do have projections for it, so it may be there, and I just don't know where to look for it. I would suggest to contact support at rotogrinders.com and ask them. But our prop model has NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB, PGA, college sports, all the top sports books. I mean, you can get that separately for yourself, and it uses all of our projections here at RotoGrinders. And if you get a combo premium, you can get all the statistical projections. You could download it and do whatever the hell you want with it. So, like, you could import that and export it, mix it with your own model, do it whatever the hell you want with it. But today, like I mentioned bets before that I have Crawford under 17.5 outs, minus 125 on FanDuel. And also I've showed Imanaga over strikeouts, over 6.5 strikeouts at plus 114 on FanDuel. In addition to that, Mountcastle, Garver, Moore, home runs. I've so much more than that, but I mean, I'm not going to just sit here and rattle off 122 bets of this little thing, that little thing out. I mean, that's how I bet. Any last words, Taylor, before we get out of here?
I guess I should say that you should play whoever you want and that you're probably going to lose anyway. So there's always tomorrow if you do. And good luck.
Combining them together. Play whoever you want as me, and you're only going to lose.
They go hand in hand.
Anyway. Right, so why not? Why play the chalk when you could just lose playing the Braves for the 17th slate in a row, right?
Exactly.
And they look promising. The thing about the Braves is that they come out and it's like, oh, they scored 3 runs in the second inning, and it's like, the game's over and it's 3-1, and you're like, what happened?
Yeah, took their foot off the gas after the 3-run explosion in the second inning. Thanks a lot.
Okay, hit that thumbs up button on your way out the door. Hit that notification bell to know when we go live. We got Grinders live later today. Crunch time. Roth will be on the weather report. Tell you all about that Cubs White Sox game. I'll be on tomorrow. Tomorrow, I think we'll be on at noon. The RotoGrinders today is going to be preempted by Grinders Live. We'll be talking about the early afternoon slate. Tomorrow, I'll be on with Dean. So check me out then. I get to sleep maybe an hour later in order to show up at noon. So that's always a good thing. So until next time, I'm here with you most of the time, Monday through Friday, 11 o'clock Eastern, talking about all things you're thinking about. Daily fantasy props and pick 'em on RotoGrinders today.